I'm Dr. Paul Salvatori. Welcome to the first episode of a special series, the Peterson Files, on the Dark Room. Before I tell you what this series is about, a bit of a backstory. Late 2016, when Dr. Jordan Peterson, the now famous University of Toronto professor and clinical psychologist, was in the middle of a controversy for refusing to recognize a Canadian law that would require him to address students on the basis of their preferred gender pronoun, I had the opportunity to speak with him on the Dark Room. As he, having just parked his car, slowly climbed the stairs to the show's studio, I noticed something right away. He looked very tired. I asked, "How are you?" "Depends who that question's for," he replied, then shook my hand. Inside the studio itself, Dr. Peterson was hardly tired at all. From practically the very start to the end of my discussion with him, he delivered what felt like an impassioned lecture, outlining his philosophical worldview on topics ranging from the dangers of ideology to the responsible educator. In fact, as I later told him, I only managed to get in a couple of the dozen questions I prepared for him. He chuckled, said he liked my grandmother's 1950s studio hallway tiles, then bid my co-host and I farewell. You can hear the discussion I had with Dr. Peterson in full on thedarkroom.ca. But what I like to do in the Peterson Files is break up that rich stream of consciousness into smaller segments, each of which provides insightful starting points to delve into further philosophical analysis. Dr. Peterson blew me away by how much in-depth knowledge he shared with me, and perhaps because of the possible stress he was experiencing on account of the controversy described, with undying fervor. Revisiting this, I admit, is also a way for me to better understand several of his complex ideas, and at a manageable pace. The process involved herein is the Peterson Files, and what I humbly offer you. Following his brief introduction of his impressive professional career, Dr. Peterson began our discussion by talking about the value of free speech.
Free speech is actually the mechanism by which societies stop themselves from careening back and forth between excesses of chaos and excesses of order. Now, and I actually kind of mean that technically. And there's a reason that it works too. So it's partly, sometimes when people talk about free speech, they say, well, we should have the right to criticize our leaders. It's like, yeah, true enough, but that's not the fundamental issue. Sure. The fundamental issue is that freedom of speech allows people to identify problems, to formulate solutions, and to reach consensus about the solutions without having to engage in conflict. And so it's the collective version of thinking. And unless you don't think thinking is a very good idea, it probably isn't, but it beats the hell out of not thinking.
And I think wherever you are on the political spectrum, Dr. Peterson's right. If we're not engaged in the civil dialogue that is free speech when we are disagreeing with each other, eventually things turn ugly. Free speech, on the other hand, checks our aggression. It provides us with the framework in which we must present our ideas or point of view rationally, through argumentation and not attacking the other personally. It is one of the most dignified forms of resolving our differences that we have. What I have seen as a photojournalist, however, documenting political rallies and protests is another matter altogether. It's actually quite frightening. Up close to the people I'm photographing, personifying radical ideologies on both the left and right, I see madness in their eyes. They are often yelling, using physical and psychological intimidation to force the other to agree with them. I've seen the blows Dr. Peterson's talking about, occurring on more than one occasion. Such violent breakdown of dialogue makes me feel I'm in the presence of evil. For not only is bullying going on, hordes of people are intent on harming each other. They want the person they are attacking to suffer before ever concurring with them. It seems sadistic to me, like in Stanley Kubrick's classic film A Clockwork Orange, where Alex endures unbearable pain any time, after subject to dehumanizing conditioning, he attempts to exercise a will of his own. That's why I get it when Dr. Peterson tells me what's troubled him over the years.
I've been haunted by, you might say, collective madness since I was a kid. I remember when I was 13, the first reasonable academic work that I did was on the Holocaust. And I had a librarian at that time, Rachel Notley's mother, as it turns out, who was a very good friend of mine, who introduced me to all sorts of political writing, Solzhenitsyn, Orwell, Huxley. Huxley is a political writer as well. And I was very fascinated, the way that you're fascinated when you drive by a train wreck. I was fascinated by what had happened in the Holocaust, partly because I couldn't understand how you could be human and do the things that people, say in the guards in particular, say in the death camps, would actually do to people. I couldn't understand how those people could be the same species as me. And I tried to figure that out for a very long period of time. I did eventually figure that out when I figured out that I could do that I was capable of such things, which was, of course, a terrible shock, as it is to anyone who realizes that.
A crude interpretation of Dr. Peterson's last statement would be that he's admitting to being a Nazi. But he's not, even though mainstream media, often framing him as a crazy authoritarian, might be eager to present the statement as proof he is. The same statement is actually a reminder, the one that still scares my socks off. We have, in each and every one of us, the capacity to do profound evil, to be cruel in ways beyond what most are comfortable admitting. But we need to talk about this dark side, including the madness I've seen as a photojournalist, lest things get worse. Compassion, yes, my love for you too, listener, impels me to be part of that effort. Though life is suffering, as Dr. Peterson makes clear in his recent book 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, none should be allowed to unnecessarily inflict pain on others. If we go that way, we're following a recipe for chaos. Instead, I believe we've a moral obligation to not act on, but figure out how to control the evil within us, in order to better protect humanity, as much as we might disagree with each other. Hope you enjoyed the first episode of the Peterson Files. I invite you to send your feedback at paulsalvatori@simpatico.ca, even if, in the parlance of Dr. Peterson, you insist on not being too agreeable. Till next time, this is The Dark Room.